The end of the year is the perfect time to get your kids engaged in book clubs. They keep your students' attention, keep them engaged in the lesson, and it takes all the responsibility off of you as the teacher to plan lessons for the last 2 weeks of school. But the problem is that book clubs can be overwhelming to plan because it requires a lot of work in advance. In this video, I'm going to be sharing 7 tips for making book clubs a success in the classroom. Hello everyone, my name is Bridget Spackman. I'm a multi-age teacher in Central Pennsylvania. I teach 4th, 5th, and 6th grade kiddos across all content areas. I have a passion for ELA, authentic instruction, and rigorous teaching. Okay, so here is a secret. You do not, and you should not, be grading a ton of stuff when it comes to book clubs. This is a time when you're listening and engaging in conversations about books. And here's another secret. You do not have to read all of the books. I have very specific sets in my classroom that I like to use year after year, but I haven't read them all yet. I'm working on it. Each summer, I like to take one book home and make it my mission to read and take notes. Yes, it is a good idea that you are familiar with the text, but as a facilitator, this doesn't mean that you need to remember or know each part. It's all about being able to listen and ask the right questions when meeting with groups. I've been incorporating book clubs for the last 6 years, and this past year, I felt as though I had the perfect combination of tasks, discussions, and check-ins. So we're going to be jumping in to the first tip. Tip number 1 is to have a selection of books for your students to choose from. And I like to think of this as holding a raffle. So select the books that you want your students to be able to read during this time. You may have 6 books, 8 books. It really depends on the inventory that you have at your school or within your own personal classroom. So you're going to set these out and you're going to participate in just a discussion. You can read a chapter from each of the books as an entire class, have a discussion with that. You can also have students participate in a book tasting. Now, these have really kind of evolved over the years. Some of them have been super fancy with book tastings. Other times I've done things that are super low key. Really and truly, you can make this very, very simple and sweet just by putting out some tablecloths, some little plastic plates that you get from the Dollar Tree, and then putting on some fun like cafe music in the background. That's really all you have to do to have a nice little book tasting, and the kids really enjoy it. So they have a way for them to be able to kind of record some of their responses and their thoughts about the book. They can add a rating to that book. But at the very end of this, what I like to do is just take some colored Astro Brights paper, and then I will cut them into little sheets. And then I will hand out 3 to each of my students. So once they've kind of had an opportunity to taste each of the different books that I have available for them, they will then write their name on each of those 3 sheets of paper. From there, I will have baskets laid out with the books that go along with that corresponding basket. So I will usually put the book either in front or behind the basket. It's whatever makes the most sense for you. And students will put their names in the top 3 choices. And so then we have our raffle day. And from there, I will just take one of the baskets. I will pull out so many cards for however many books that I have. So if I only have 6 of that selection, then I will pull 6 names. If I have, only 5 of that selection, I will only pull 5 names. Now, if I pull a name from one basket and pull the name from the second basket, I will just give them the first one that they kind of chose. I really don't allow them to kind of make choices because then it kind of gets a little bit too much. So if I pulled their name from basket number 1, and then I pull it again from basket number 2, I just go ahead and I throw it out and I just keep moving on. Sometimes I don't even tell them that I pulled their name because it just makes life a little bit easier. So that's a really easy way for you to do it. I like to do it this way instead of making a Google form, just because I feel like my kids are really excited about it. They like to do the drum roll on the desks, and it's always just so much more fun versus me just kind of calling out names. It's like you're pulling it out of a basket. I mean, how much more fun is that? Tip number 2 is one of my favorites, and this is to keep a teacher book with notes and highlighted sections kind of off to the side. And I really like this because I have a book that is completely marked up. And this is really nice because I don't have to remember all of the parts of the text. This is a very simple and quick way for me to be able to reference a book so I don't have to reread it every year, because I have a tendency to forget things. So if I have a book that's already marked up, I have notes, I have vocabulary words circled, I have items that allow me to just kind of quickly reference them. This makes it easier for me to have a discussion and engage with my students. So I like to kind of create excitement and secret behind it, because I will take a little label that just says teacher copy or big secret on it, and then I will just tape it onto the cover of that book. And this is nice because I will keep it at my desk and I will have all of the different options for it for each of the different book clubs that I have running inside of my classroom. And then I can open up those books and be able to reference them as needed. So it's a great time-saving hack that you can use. And if you kind of do this over the summer, it just makes life a little bit easier once you're kind of in the crazy hecticness of the school year. So create a little teacher copy for yourself, and stop having to reread those books every year because you end up forgetting what happens in the text. Tip number 3 is to have a reading log for your students. This really helps your groups determine how much they're going to need to read in a day. Now, I like to really set this expectation from the beginning. So the way that I like to do this with my students is we will either go by the number of chapters or the number of pages. I will be honest, the number of chapters is so much easier than trying to determine how many pages they're going to be reading and where they're going to stop, because kids typically like to stop at the end of chapters. So we will look at how many chapters we have to read, and from there, as a group, they have to then do the math. So I tell them how many days they're going to have to be able to complete discussions and the days that they're going to be able to read. And from there, they will take those, they will divide it out, and then they will determine how many they have to read each day. So we have a nice little reading tracker that will tell them, hey, I'm going to read chapters 1 through 3 on this day. I'm going to read chapters 4 through 6 on this day, and so on and so forth. It keeps everything just kind of in one spot for my kids, so that way they can always go back and reference it and they don't get behind on their reading assignments. I also like to make sure that I have a copy of what they're going to be reading on specific days, so that way I can always kind of touch base with some of my kiddos who I know just need some gentle reminders on making sure that they're getting their work done. Tip number 4 is to assign jobs to students in order to create a focus and a purpose for what they're reading. This is going to be like literature circle jobs. Now, I have done a variety of these over the years, and I think last year was my absolute favorite way of doing this. So the key to literature circles is that you do not want to overwhelm your students. The entire purpose of reading books is for them to really engage with the text. And if you're constantly giving them more work, more sheets that they have to constantly fill out, then it's going to really take away from the discussion, because students are going to be so focused on just completing this page. So something that I did last year that I loved is I provided my students with descriptions for each of the literature circle jobs. Wow, that's a mouthful. And from there, my students were then just to use sticky notes in order to kind of share their thinking for that specific role. So every time that they would read, they would choose a job, they would kind of discuss it as a group, they would choose a job. And from there, when they were doing their reading, they would just use sticky notes to kind of jot things down. So if they were a visuals person, they would draw something on a sticky note. If they were somebody who was looking for vocabulary words, they would draw it on the sticky note and put it in their book. And the reason why I really like this is because it causes students to flip through the book and look at the pages and say, hey, on page this is what I found. And here's kind of my sticky note to show my thinking. It keeps them involved in the text versus focusing so much on either a graphic organizer or something else that you have kids doing. It makes things very simple, and it's less work for you. Come on, guys. Who really wants to grade literature circle papers at the end of the year? Not I. Not I. But it is very important to create a very specific focus for your students. You want them to go in with a purpose. And so after they would do that one specific literature circle job, then the next time they were reading another set of chapters, they would choose a different job. Now, I kind of pushed them and I told them, I want you to do all of them before you start to repeat some of them. And they loved it. They really thought it was engaging. The conversations were great when they were having discussions. I really felt as though my classroom came alive and that they really were so involved in their text and sharing their ideas. So this is something fantastic to do. And if you're in my Bridging Literacy community, then you are going to be receiving all of the literature circle labels and tags so that you can create either badges or have just a paper out for your students to reference. But all of that is going to be within the community. You can go and grab that freebie now and start implementing that into your classrooms. And if you're not part of the community, don't worry, we're going to be opening our doors very soon. I encourage you to follow the link down in the description box. We have a waiting list that you can subscribe for, and we're only going to be launching to our waiting list. So make sure that you are subscribed to that so that you can get notified as soon as our doors open. Okay, so back to our tips. Tip number 5 is to create check-ins with your students. Now, I like to have very specific points when I focus on key concepts that I want my students to review. Now, this could be parts of plot, character traits. Now, remember, you don't want to overwhelm your students. So don't start talking about conflict and characters and plot all at once. Pick very specific points and don't do this every single day. Honestly, I would stick to maybe 2 or 3 of these assignments a week. I wouldn't do any more than that. The entire purpose of this, again, is to not overwhelm them with work. We want to make sure that they are engaged, they're having conversations, and they're just excited about reading a book and being able to discuss it with their peers. So think about some of the areas that you really want to target and focus on with your specific class. It doesn't have to be everything. So you can kind of mix and choose the things that you want them to do. So maybe you have them focusing on mood and tone and setting on one day, and then another day you might have them pick out one character and analyze that one character. And then another day you might have them discuss the conflict that's happening within the story. So choose the focus. Put these kind of sprinkled in throughout the book club time, but don't have them so much to where it's happening every single day. Tip number 6 is to assign dates to submit work, organizers, and check-ins. Kids need dates. They need to have days that they know that they have to complete certain things by. So I have specific assigned dates in order for them to submit some of their organizers, whether it be that I have them looking at the setting, the conflict, the characters, whatever it might be. I have things that I want them to be able to go back and say, hey, here are the kind of the pieces that I know that I need to turn in by this day. I typically try to give the kids about 2 days to complete an assignment. And that's my kind of average time frame. If it's something that's a little bit more heavy, I might get them some few more days to do it, but I want them to be able to submit those in so that I can give them feedback and be able to discuss with them as a group on their thinking and their process of that specific text. So make sure that you are assigning some of those dates and do it in advance so they have a very clear vision of when am I going to have a lot of workload and when do I really need to stay focused. This is really going to help them kind of plan as a group, maybe even plan to do their reading during another specific time frame. You never really know, but this is a great opportunity to just kind of talk about responsibility and how we can be responsible for making sure that we're turning these assignments in on time. Tip number 7 is to create weekly reflections. I love some good reflections, and I really enjoyed this. This was something new that I started implementing in last year. So reflections are just a great way to kind of do a check-in for the week. They can share what they read, the roles that they had, how they work together with their peers, what do they feel their group needs to work on, what do they feel they individually need to work on. And so you can ask kind of some prompting questions to get them to really kind of think about how did the week go overall, and even ask them for some suggestions on how it can go better next time. I love this activity because a reflection is just a good way to kind of get a feel for the groups and make sure that everybody's just getting along and everything is running smoothly. And this is also just, again, another great way to kind of just check in with students and make sure that they're understanding the text and that they're doing the work. So Weekly reflections are very simple, but it's also incredibly useful. So that is it. Hopefully these tips have given you some inspiration. If you're looking for more tips and resources and you would like to get your hands on the Literature Circles activity that I share, then I invite you to join the waiting list for the Bridging Literacy community. We share some helpful tips and resources when teaching ELA standards, provide you with monthly resources to help engage your students, and so much more. Thank you all so much for watching this video. Please be sure to give it a like, subscribe if you have not already, and hit that notification bell so you can get notified the next time I upload a new video. Thank you all again, and I'll catch you all soon. Bye!